We're into about week 8 or 9 of the question, really, what is the gospel? And so we've looked at some of the overt aspects of the gospel. We've looked at the way it's preached, the way it should be preached, the message of the gospel. And this morning I want to look at something a little bit more earthy. So the question we're looking at this morning is, what does a redemptive community look like? Because that's a big part of the gospel. When Jesus went, when he left earth, he left a church. And his intention was that that church would continue his ministry. And so as the church, and we're all a part of the church, so whenever we, complain and grumble about the church, we're actually complaining and grumbling about us. But the church is a redemptive community. What exactly does that mean? Well, redemption relates to or centers around redemption in salvation. So the word redemption in the original language means to buy back. God's bought us back as believers. And so the mission that we have as a church, if we're a redemptive community, is that we're in the business of buying people back, of taking them back from the world and bringing them back to the kingdom where they belong. Everybody has a home in the kingdom of God, and our job is to be a part of the process of spotting them and bringing them back to God. So we have a collective calling to bring the world to Jesus Christ. And so that's what we're going to look at this morning. And so we often think of evangelism. I don't know about you, but I do this. I'm not an evangelist. Now, I've probably led a couple of hundred people to Christ, maybe more than that over the years. But at the end of the day, I don't consider myself to be an evangelist. And my view of evangelists is that these guys are the lone rangers that ride into town on a white steed and preach the gospel and do a massive reaping of harvest, and then they ride out and leave us to fix the mess up. At least as a pastor, that's been my experience of it. And so we often think of evangelists in a different kind of way, and it's almost like we can't attain to that. And it's not that they're on a pedestal, they're just different. These guys are seriously different. And when I say guys, that covers both the sexes. At the end of the day, one of Deb's and my best friends in that kind of ministry is a person called Jackie Pullinger. Now, she's obviously a woman and incredible evangelist. But again, we can't even survive in their shadows. And so in our eyes, these people are single-handedly commissioned to save the world. And often we think of that even if we don't admit it. But the church is here as Christ's representatives, every single one of us. In fact, that word Christian initially, in the beginning, meant little Christs. And so our role is to be Christ to the world, which is really what we're speaking about this morning. We are Christ's representatives. And so the gospel message, we should expect, at least in part, is communicated by the presence of the church in the world. Now, sometimes that's all it feels like. We're present, but we're not really accounted for. We're here, but we're not really doing much. And a lot of our view of the church has been tainted by, horrible things of late in the news. But there's a better way. And the way is this thing called incarnational presence. And so the church is meant to be, what that word means is that the church is immersed into the local culture, and as such we become Jesus to that culture. That's why we use the word incarnational. And so as a church, Southland Church is meant to be incarnational. Miraculously, God's placed us right here in the middle of a shopping centre. Hello, what do you think that means? God's put us here. We couldn't have orchestrated this. It was an amazing sequence of events that led us to be having church in the middle of a shopping centre. And so God is saying something to us. The gospel is incarnational. We are Jesus here in this place. To the people out in the streets, they don't know what the gospel looks like unless they look at us. And so it's up to us to give a fair representation of what that looks like. So what does it mean? Well, basically we become part of the world. But at the end of the day, we're not like the world. We're different. We're going to shine like lights, hopefully. And just as the Son of God took on human flesh and came into the world, we are to be actively involved in the world as well. You see, Jesus was otherworldly, but at the same time, he explained things in ways that people could relate to. This is one of the reasons he spoke to the crowds with parables. These parables were just stories. They were stories that people understood because they related to Jewish culture. And so as incarnational believers, our job is to speak to the world using language that the world understands, but something that is heavily laced with the kingdom. So it's dripping with the presence of God as we do that. We are to be connected to Christ, rooted in him, completely founded in heaven, in a sense strangers in this world, but at the same time we are called to enhance the culture, to bring spice to it, to bring salt to it, to bring something that is completely otherworldly. Now, we don't have to be so spiritual that the world can't relate to us. In fact, we shouldn't be that. And I love the term that John Wimber first coined, which was, we're meant to be naturally supernatural. We're in the world, but we're not of the world. We're supernatural, but we're made of meat, like everybody else. We're made of flesh. And so it's important that we embrace the people of this culture that we live in, but that we don't embrace the values of the culture. And this is where some people come to grief. And so many different aspects of incarnational ministry have run on the rocks because at the end of the day, we've become like the world. And we've embraced the value systems of the world and we've started to live them out. And not a good thing when the church starts to do that. And so in John 17, the essence of Jesus' prayer here was calling us to this ministry of being incarnational. And he said, my prayer is not that you take them out of the world, and he's obviously speaking to the Father, but that you protect them from the evil one. They are not of the world, even as I am not of it. Now, Jesus here is speaking of us. He's primarily talking about those that he was spending time with, the disciples, but this was an enduring statement that related to people like you and I until he returns. And so we're meant to be in the world, but not of the world. Incarnational ministry seeks to dispense with ministry from a distance. In other words, we're not called to preach at the population. And the operative word there is at. In other words, we're not separate, but we're called to be up close and personal. That's what it means to be incarnational. Get amongst the people. And don't be afraid to do that. You see, for too long, the church has been defensive in the way we've tried to present Christ. And we've done it from using apologetics, which are a good thing. But we need to be a little bit on the front foot as well. We need to understand that we can't reach the world by standing back and speaking at them. We've got to get down and close and in with the people that we work and live with. And so if we were going to be like Jesus to the world, then it would be imperative that people know us personally, that your neighbours know you. It would be imperative that they not only know you, but they experience Jesus through you. And so when they're sick, we care for them. When they need a meal, we bring it to them. When there's, kinds of family issues, that's the time when the church can really be at its best. Again, John Wimber used to pray, if you want to reach your neighbours, he'd say, pray that disaster comes to them. And he kind of said it with tongue in cheek, because we don't want to, I don't think that's probably a great thing to heap curses on your next door neighbour. But at the end of the day, disaster will strike. It strikes everybody, right? And when it does, we are the answer. The church is meant to be the answer. We're right there. We need to be right there in the midst of that thing. And so the idea that Christians should represent Christ is a very real scriptural concept. At the end of the day, the gospel is incarnate through us, and we become Christ to the world as we embrace it. And so what should an incarnational community of God's people look like? And I want us to think about that a little bit this morning. What should that look like? And how can you add to it personally? Are we an audience? Are we an army? Are we a social club? Are we a family? And obviously, you're starting to put the pieces together. There's a thread running through there that causes us to be something that's very different to the world. We can't just be another club. We have to be a people that are connected, that are caring, and that are representing Jesus. And so I have a few areas this morning that I'd like us to look at. And the first area is that we want to develop a culture of faith. Now, I think that we're doing that. I think locally here we're doing that. But the church is a culture of faith. We're growing into a group of people, a family, that shows the world what faith looks like. And faith looks like this in James 5. Is any one of you in trouble? He should pray. Is anyone happy? Let him sing songs of praise. And so a culture of faith is real. A culture of faith is a place and a people where when things happen, we respond in a certain way. Now, things happen everywhere. Things go, pear-shaped, the bottom falls out of it. Nothing ever turns out the way we expect it should. And again, this is when the church shines. And so when James says here, is any one of you in trouble? That's a rhetorical question. Because what he's really saying is, when you are in trouble, this is how you should respond. We should pray. Our first instinct is not to go to the medicine cabinet. It's not to phone a friend. It's not to go into a panic. But our first response is to pray, because that's where a community of faith is built. A community of faith is built in the secret places where we connect with God one-on-one. And if we're all doing that together, something special really happens out of that. Again, is anyone happy? So there will be days, guys, when things go well. And they may only be, 1 or 2 days a week. But hey, take it as it goes and ride that thing. Surf it all the way to the beach. And when things are going well, we need to let people know that things are going well. It never ceases to amaze me that we can have an incredible worship set and people show up late. You guys don't, but other people do. It never ceases to amaze me that we can have incredibly engaging worship. I think our worship guys do great. And you know what? We need to get right in there and support them. We need to lead the worship so that they've got to catch up with us. We need to jump in and just go for it and worship God for all we're worth and express our thanksgiving and shout out our praises and just take this thing over. It's your church after all. We don't have to be dignified. We don't have to be civilized. We don't have to behave ourselves. Sunday mornings is meant to be a time, and it should spill out to the rest of the week. When we get out there, the world needs to see that we are recklessly in love with Jesus and that we have every reason to be happy about being on planet Earth, and even happier when we leave it. But at the end of the day, while we're here, we're going to do it with Jesus. And so incarnational Christians aren't boring people, because that's not going to cut it. We just will not win people to Christ that way. They might think that when we were baptized in vinegar, but it's not true. And we mustn't let them think that. And so a culture of faith produces believers who know how to pray and who know how to take personal responsibility for our spiritual journey. You see, at the end of the day, we've grown up as a church not on the basis that you guys are coming here because of what I preach, hopefully, because you're going to be very disappointed if that's the case. But we come here because we're mutually growing in this thing together, and we're mentoring one another. We're caring for one another, hopefully. We're starting to develop a culture where if someone doesn't show up, you get a phone call, or someone turns up on your doorstep and says, hey, is everything okay? And I love that that's happening. In Philippians 2, verse 12, it says that we are each to work out our salvation with fear and trembling. And so when you think about it, that scripture puts an onus of responsibility on every single one of us. We have a responsibility to work out our own salvation. In the end, you won't get to stand before Jesus and say, but Rob didn't tell me that. or the pastor of that church didn't tell me, or the book that I was reading, it didn't mention that, or God TV didn't tell me that, or anything else, whatever your source of spiritual enlightenment is. But at the end of the day, we are all responsible to work out our salvation with fear and trembling. And as we do that, we're all heading in the same direction. You know, it's like Jesus is the lighthouse. He's the beacon. And as we focus on him, we go that way together. And as incarnational representatives of Christ, we then begin to reflect the glory of God, and people pick it up. It saddens me to think, and I love it and hate it at the same time, that the most effective Christians in evangelism usually are new Christians. Now, I understand that, and I get the fact that their friends see the before and the after shots, and it's often stunningly different. But as a guy that's been saved for 40 years, I want to be the guy that's leading the battle, that's leading the charge. I want to be the one that, when you walk into the room, people go, there's something different about this person. Can you tell me what's going on in your life? And, you know, I'm disappointed when that doesn't happen. I think we need to be the kind of people that are totally wearing Jesus on our chin, that we're just out there taking the lead all the time and showing people what Jesus looks like. In Matthew 4 and verse 23, it says, Jesus went throughout Galilee, teaching in the synagogues, preaching the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness among the people. And then it says in verse 24, news about him spread all over Syria, and people brought to him all who were ill with various diseases, those suffering severe pain, the demon-possessed, those having seizures, and the paralyzed, and he healed them. Now, we could preach we could kind of get something out of that that's really supernatural. And we could kind of whip everyone up into a frenzy and have us all go out in the street and pray for the sick. And that would be wonderful, but we'd miss something if that's all we got out of this passage. Because when we drill into it, what we see is that Jesus went out into Galilee. He was out there. He didn't stay put. He didn't stay in one place, but he went out. It says he went out through Galilee, teaching in their synagogues. Now, what does that mean? Now, he was Jewish, so he had an advantage in that he was going into a synagogue, but he went to their synagogue. He didn't stay on his own turf. He didn't pitch a tent and run a crusade and have everybody coming to him. But he went out. He preached in their synagogues. It says that he preached the good news of the kingdom and healed every disease and sickness, where? Among the people. So he went right out there, wherever the people were. Where are people today? They're in pubs, they're in sporting complexes, they're in entertainment, they're all over the place. Now, we have to be really wise about this, because there's a fine line with being in the world and not of the world. And so when we're going into those places, we have to be really careful. And so as a church, and we didn't do that this year, but as a church, we go regularly to events like the Body, Mind and Psychic Expo. And we go there together. We go in big teams. We go in safety with numbers. And we go into enemy territory and we preach the gospel. We're incarnate. We're amongst people that are doing all kinds of stuff. They're having their palms read. They've got, Hindu chanting going on, and Buddhist monks and Freemasons. And it's like a feast for spiritual junkies. And we take people in there into enemy territory, and we're incarnate. And we don't make a lot of noise about it, apart from putting a banner up that says, healing. But we invite people to come in and we pray for them and talk to them and connect with them. And we do that not because we think we're going to win the world to Christ in that place. Not that we think we're going to shut down the Psychic Expo, though that has been happening. But we do it because we need to learn how to do it. And so it's a part of our discipleship stuff. We need to be in those places. And so as a church, we do it with safety in numbers in the most extreme places, so that as God's people, we can feel more comfortable about being incarnate. So that when you go into your workplace, when you go into your school, when you go into the social places that you meet, It's kind of familiar to us. We've learned how to do this thing. A culture of faith is built as we together rely on God for everything. And guys, when we go into those places, we have to rely on God. Because I remember the first time we took a team to the Body, Mind and Psychic Expo, we were like sheep huddled in the corner, hiding from people. It was scary. There were witches walking around with their black hats and capes. It was full on. You know, there were palm readers and wizards and people running around the place waving flags and streamers. It was like the church nightmare. Flag ministry. It was happening everywhere. And so here we are huddled in the corner, scared as, and we're praying for our own safety and existence at that point. And gradually, over time, we learned how to do ministry. We started connecting with people. And what we discovered is they're actually just normal people. They've just been a little bit led astray. In fact, mostly the blokes have been led astray. Because their girlfriend or their wife or whatever says, why don't you come with me to this thing? You know, there's nice perfumes and incenses and you can have your palm read if you like. And the guy says, whatever. And he just goes along for the show. And so we connected with some really, really normal people. But that's where we're meant to be. Those people are everywhere. In fact, you might think that it's crazy to go into a place like that, but at the end of the day, they're the same people you work with on Monday morning. They're everywhere. Not Life FM, SAFM was there, Life FM wasn't there. There were radio stations, there were TV channels, there was St John's Ambulance, there was the Salvos. It was on for young and old, everything was there. And so for 7 or 8 years, it might even be more than that, we've been going into that place. Mike and Barb have been leading teams there recently. And we've seen some wonderful things happen. Simply because we've immersed ourselves into the culture without embracing the culture itself. And so James, in the book of James, this is a great passage and a great book. In James 5, James says, is any one of you sick? He should call the elders of the church and pray over him and anoint him with oil in the name of the Lord. Now again, this is part of building a community of faith. Verse 15, and the prayer offered in faith will make the sick person well. The Lord will raise him up. If he has sinned, he'll be forgiven. Therefore confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed. The prayer of a righteous man is powerful and effective. And so that's how communities of faith get built. Now again, another story, and I'm going to get Nolene to help me here. I'm putting you on the spot, Nolene. Why don't you come up? I'm going to really embarrass her here. She's not embarrassed, don't worry. I wouldn't do that to you, I just do it to her. So a few weeks ago, we had a prayer meeting here on Saturday morning, and you might remember we did some really weird things. We put some oil on tissues, and we prayed over the tissues, and then we got people to take them home and lay them on their neighbours and friends and enemies and everybody else. And I don't think it was your enemy that you laid it on, but Nolene took one home, and I want her to tell you the story in 30 seconds.
Well, it was for my husband, who not many of you know.
Is that on, Alex?
Oh,
okay.
Yeah. He's not a Christian, so that's another problem. But we prayed over this tissue that some things about that he'd have his eyes open and those things as well. But the main thing was that he had a fall recently and broke his collarbone. Had been going around with his arm like this and he couldn't do anything much. And I said to him what had happened and that it was in the Bible, so that's okay. And I put it on his shoulder and I prayed for the healing. I didn't say the other things to him, but they were in it. But just for the healing, within a couple of days, he was doing all sorts of things that he couldn't do. And we went back to have the 6-week checkup, and I knew what they were going to say. It's healing beautifully, and there's no problems. So
this was a fracture?
This was a broken collarbone in a bad place right up here where there's not much blood supply, and the doctor said on the 2-week visit, which was before this, that it might have to be pinned because the blood supply is not as good there as it is in other places. So Ken's an 82? He's 88.
88? Man.
And he's very frail.
There you go.
And it healed in 6 weeks.
What? Sorry.
Sorry, healed in 6 weeks.
So again, guys, this is what a culture of faith does. Now, we prayed that morning for maybe 20 or 30 people and tissues, and I've heard back from one person. I don't know if there's anyone else that's seen anything, like that happened. But at the end of the day, that's how we build a culture of faith. And we celebrate the one. We don't commiserate the 19. We just keep doing it. We just keep praying. And you know what? As we do that, the numbers go up because God rewards faith all the time. And so our first response to trouble should be that we come to God. And I'm speaking to individuals right now. When you're in trouble, don't dial my number. I'm only a pastor. Give me a break. The first response we have is to go to God. Because we are responsible, each one of us, for our own salvation. That's what it means, to work out our salvation with fear and trembling. It doesn't mean you're going to hell if you don't get healed. That's not the part of salvation we're talking about. Salvation is much more than whether you go to heaven or hell. It includes that, and it's never less than that, but it's a lot more than that. We work out our salvation by beginning to experience what the kingdom of God is like right now. And so when we get there, we're not going to be surprised by how great it is, how awesome it is. And so at the end of the day, we are primarily responsible first to build our faith, and second, to build a culture of faith as we come together and to celebrate the stories that happen like Nolene and to be involved in that because you guys prayed for it. The people that were there that morning, I don't think Deb and I prayed for anybody. We just laid tissues out and you guys prayed over them, took them home, and bang, something happened. Awesome. So let's get on with it. So that's the first one. Let's build a culture of faith. And the second one, let's build a culture that loves and values people. Again, I think we're doing quite well at this. We can do better. But hopefully people that come here and visit understand that we're a people that love each other. We're for each other. We understand that there's failings. We're not perfect. But that's not why we're here. We're not here to try and create a perfect church. And so in Matthew 18, and again, can I recommend every single person go home today and read Matthew 18 and bookmark it because you're going to need it often. Because this is the passage in the Bible where you start learning how to solve disputes. And trust me, it's one of the most important passages that you'll ever come across. Matthew 18. And so from verse 11, it says, "The Son of Man came to save what was lost. What do you think? If a man owns 100 sheep and one of them wanders away, will he not leave the 99 on the hills and go to look for the one that wandered off? And if he finds it, I tell you the truth, he is happier about that one sheep than about the 99 that did not wander off. In the same way, your Father in heaven is not willing that any of these little ones should be lost." And so when you think about it, the heart of Matthew 18 is firstly for people. The heart of Matthew 18 isn't about so much solving disputes as it is about the heart of the person, caring for people. And at the end of the day, the church is people. It's God's people. It's His family. Jesus is God's only begotten Son, and we are His brothers and sisters. So in a sense, we've been adopted into a family, each one of us. You see, a begotten child is one who is born of the same DNA. And so when you think about Jesus, Jesus has divine DNA. He's the only begotten Son of the Father. There's something very special about the first time, for those of you that have had children, and for those that haven't, you've been spared many things as well, I presume. But there's something very special about the first time you lay eyes on your firstborn. They're a crinkly little, everybody else thinks they're ugly and you think they're awesome. They cry and poop and all that stuff. But regardless of all that, we just love them, don't we? The first time we lay eyes on them, we love them. And that's what it's like with the only begotten. God the Father gave His only Son, and then He allowed Him to go to the cross. I don't think God sent Jesus to the cross. There's probably a theological argument there. I don't think God sent Jesus to the cross. I think there was a discussion that took place that was probably like a debate without sin, where Jesus said, I'm going to the cross. I'm going to initiate this. And the Father said, but I don't want you to go. You're mine. You're my only begotten Son. You're the little baby. That same connection. Now, I know Jesus is the self-sufficient one and he existed eternally, past to future and all those things. I'm not trying to downplay the divinity of Jesus. But there must have been a connection between the Father and the Son. And ultimately, the Father allows Jesus to go to the cross. You see, natural children aren't chosen. They're born into our family. We have no idea how they're going to turn out. They all turn out different, don't they? And everybody nods. Yes. You can't predict it. We don't know what colour eyes they're going to have. We don't know what sort of job they're going to do. We don't know who they're going to marry. We don't know anything much about them. But we love them. We don't even know what gender they're going to be until they show up, usually. And yet, when we lay eyes on them, they are the most beautiful children on the planet. Butter would not melt in their mouth until they start to grow up a little bit. And so, in Western countries, we don't really understand adoption because it doesn't happen a lot. And there are good reasons for that, and I'm not going to be too politically incorrect this morning. But I think abortion probably changed the formula a little bit on adoption. And so we don't know much about adoption in Western countries like Australia. By the way, we probably should get used to it because the way the marriage laws have changed, there will be some kind of thing happening behind the scenes where adoption will get big again. But in other cultures, adopted children are chosen. So think about it. We have a natural child that just shows up and you take what you get. You take whatever gender it is, you take whatever hair colour it is, you take whatever bad habits comes with the thing. I'm being a little bit flippant. But with an adopted child, you actually get to choose the thing. Again, I'm being flippant. You can choose the gender, you can choose the hair colour, you can choose the character, you can probably have a reference. I know that in some countries that's the case. With an adoption, usually the most naturally attractive, brightest, and often male, by the way, because of the kind of cultures that we're talking about, are the first chosen. And so, those who are naturally endowed win over those that are not. And so when we think about it, God chose you. God chose you. He went after you. And if we compare it to anything like that, he went after you because of who you are. Now, I know that it's far broader than that, and I'm very much oversimplifying it. But adoption is really special because it means that you weren't just born, you didn't just show up, you weren't a lucky dip. God chose you. And he went after you, often despite some of the stuff that's in us. The Apostle Paul in Romans 8:23 suggests that we're all sons of adoption. We all belong to God through adoption. We've been chosen. And in Ephesians 1:4 verse 6, he says, For he chose us in him, he chose us in him before the creation of the world to be holy and blameless in his sight. In love he predestined us to be adopted as his sons through Jesus Christ, in accordance with his pleasure and will, to the praise of his glorious grace, which he has freely given us in the one he loves. And so God chose us. And so when we start talking about growing a culture that loves and respects and accepts people, it's nothing less than this. Not only were we chosen by him, but we were also loved. In 1 John 4 and verse 19, it says, we love because he first loved us. So we have no choice. We're here as God's family, chosen, loved, adopted into his family, given full rights as family members. And so it says, we love because he first loved us. If anyone says, I love God, yet hates his brother, he's a liar. That's interesting, isn't it? Because my slogan always used to be, I love God, his church, not so interested. But that just does not cut it. It goes on to say, for anyone who does not love his brother whom he has seen cannot love God whom he has not seen. So we might think we love God, but how can we possibly love God if we don't love those that he loves? If we don't love what God loves, how can we possibly love him? A redemptive community loves and values what Jesus loves, people. And when we do this well, the gospel message is strengthened. The world sees it. And they're envious for what we have. How often is that happening? Again, this is meant to be a challenge. And I think we're doing pretty well. If I preached this message in some places, I'd probably be booed out of the joint. So guys, I think we're growing in this, but we can do better. I know we can do better. But we're growing as a culture that loves people. Thirdly, we need to be a culture that knows how to confront. We know how to confront each other with hard issues. And again, you only get to that place by loving first. So don't get the cart before the horse. Get things in their right order. The biggest threat to the church, I believe, is not Satan, it's not the world, it's not the Labor government or the Liberal government or whatever government happens to be in at the time. But it's our own sin. And the truth is, God has never chosen to cover sin. Sin never gets covered. Have you noticed that? Sometimes I get embarrassed for the church. The headlines read, all sorts of stuff about priests and the church and this, that, and the other. And you go, why would God let that happen? That's a terrible witness. But the truth is, God is never ashamed or afraid to expose sin right where it is. And the church is here to represent Jesus. And I believe that this is one area that we've failed badly in that we've failed to confront sin and call it for what it is. And that's why the world's where it is at now, because the church has failed to be prophetic in many ways. Now, that is a criticism, but it also says that we're part of the solution. Because we can't leave it that way. We have to become prophetic. That's why we practice prophecy on Sunday morning, so that we can do the real stuff out in the world. Again, in Matthew 18, there's quite good guidelines here. This shows us exactly how to approach sin. It says, if your brother sins against you, go and show him his fault, just between the two of you. If he listens to you, you've won your brother over. But if he will not listen, take one or two others along, so that every matter may be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. And then verse 17, if he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if he refuses to listen even to the church, treat him as you would a pagan or a tax collector. How do you guys treat pagans and tax collectors? Or, see, at the end of the day, pagans and tax collectors deserve more love than other people, don't they? Because our job is to win them into the kingdom. So what Jesus is saying here is that if they fail all those tests, at the end of the day, love them. Don't embrace them into church leadership. Don't give them a job even cleaning the church toilets, because they're not worthy of that. But love them. Treat them like a non-Christian. And hopefully when non-Christians come here, we have the red carpet out. Hopefully they feel that. Because that's what a culture of love is meant to do. But as a church, and I'm not just pointing the finger at us, we have to learn how to confront well. Otherwise this thing blows out of all proportion, and it's not love at all if we don't confront sin. Jesus goes on in verse 18, and he says, I tell you the truth, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Again, I tell you that if two of you on earth agree about anything you ask, it will be done for you by my Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 come together in my name, there I am with them. Now that's the crux of incarnational ministry, where the church is in the world and Jesus is in the world with us. That's what he says there, isn't it? For I am there with them. And so as we learn to love and confront and live well, there's a promise that goes with it, that Jesus is going to walk through it with us. But the world needs to see a church that confronts sin swiftly and effectively, where there are as few victims as possible. Because really, when you look at that process that took place there in Matthew 18, it's quite a long process. You don't just come and shoot sin and send people away, but there's a process. Come and talk to them, one-to-one, just between you and that person. If the person repents at that point, you've won them immediately. That's the end of the process. And then there's at least 3 other processes before you say goodbye. And hopefully we never get to the 4th process. But if we do, then we're called to love them even more. We just don't let them remain family members until they get their act together. But we love them more and more. And yet the world sees a church that's accommodating of sin, that says sin is not evil, that calls something marriage that's not marriage. Again, I can't leave that thing alone. I'm like a dog that keeps going back to the bone. But you know what? That's only one issue in a world where we have failed as a church globally. And I believe locally at least, we can pick this thing up. And so our voice for justice is only weakened when there's sin in our camp. We don't really have any authority to tell the world what to do when we're failing to do it here, do we? As God's people, we have to show the way of how to deal with sin so that the gospel message can be confirmed and validated. So that people can see, in other words, that what we say is actually what we believe. And unfortunately, we have a crisis of confidence at the moment in that, I think, around the place. So we have to build a culture that knows how to confront. And then finally, we have to build a culture of forgiveness. And hopefully that goes without saying, but I just thought I'd tack it on the end. Really, for a point 4 to be in any sermon, no good preacher has point number 4. You generally stop at 3, have a summary and go home. But we're going to have number 4 this morning. And so as a church, we want to be a church that has a culture of forgiveness. That should be our first reaction. Again, continuing on in verse 21 of Matthew 18, it says, "Then Peter came to Jesus and asked, 'Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother when he sins against me? Up to 77 times?' Jesus answered, 'I tell you, not 7 times, but 77 times,' it says in the NIV. In the King James, it says 70 times 7. So it just depends on how the grammar works. But the truth is, once you get to that kind of numbers, if you're still remembering people's sin, you're a Pharisee, aren't you? I mean, we're talking about some big numbers here. The truth is, metaphors are very powerful. And Jesus used a powerful metaphor here in saying that our appetite for forgiveness should never run out. Because at the end of the day, we've been forgiven. You and I have all been forgiven, and we constantly go back to things that we know are wrong, and God forgives us every time. So we have no right not to forgive others. Whatever the number is, Jesus does not expect us to keep score when it comes to people's failings. So long as people are constantly able and willing to repent, then we have to be there to bless it and to love them and to embrace them and to bring them back. And then when we see sin, to confront it. Because eventually, things begin to change. From time to time, people fail, and sometimes they're caught in serious sin. And I'm talking about the kind of sin that leads to bondage, not just the everyday sin that happens when you look in the mirror as soon as you wake up. I'm talking about sin that holds people in bondage. In this situation, it's important that the sin is confronted, as per Matthew 18, that the person is given opportunity to repent, to change the way they think, and that the church, you and I, reflects God's mercy and forgiveness by welcoming the sinner back in and continuing to understand that it could have been us. It just wasn't us this time. When we start to live out this kind of culture, the bottom line is, guys, that sin begins to lose its hold over us. It has no more power. We disempower the enemy every time we do that. Again, James 2 verse 13, it says, mercy triumphs over judgment. And when we exercise mercy, judgment goes away generally. It's just gone. It dissolves. Sin has the power to destroy people and whole churches if it's not dealt with correctly. But when we exercise forgiveness and mercy, sin is powerless. It has no place to hide. So I want to finish off with a scripture that you probably know well. But this is one that, it's a personal one, and it's something that I believe we should do this every day. If we claim to be without sin, we deceive ourselves and the truth is not in us. If we confess our sin, he is faithful and just and will forgive us our sins and purify us from all unrighteousness. So if that is true, why would we not do that every time we wake up? And then when we don't wake up, we're going to go to glory anyway, so it's okay. I can't see why we wouldn't do that every time we wake up. So I want to suggest that maybe that's what we should be doing.